This media has been made available by Mosaic Boston Church. If you'd like to check out more resources, learn about Mosaic Boston and our neighborhood churches, or donate to this ministry, please visit mosaicboston.com.
Jesus Christ, King of glory, you are perfect in all of your ways. You're above all, and you sit in the heavens above this earth that you created from absolutely nothing. God, you are infinite in wisdom. Your goodness has no bounds. Lord, teach us that we find good in you. We find happiness in you. We find joy in you. Lord, may we as people that follow you not look other places to find what is good, but look to you and find who we are in you. Lord, that you could be our ultimate treasure, the absolute satisfaction of all that we need. God, we are broken, but you have loved us in the midst of that. And today, I pray that we would take your sacrifice that you made on the cross, not take it for granted, but take it for all that it was for us. In this moment, we are about to explore your infinite depths and glare into your glory. So, Lord, I pray that you would help us to understand how deep it is and how hard it is to understand, but how great it is that you're not a God that we can fully comprehend. Because if you were, what God would we be? What kind of God would that be? Excuse me. So, Lord, may we today follow you, trust you, and obey you. In Jesus' name, amen. If you would today, open up to Isaiah chapter 6. We'll be reading together in just a moment. This series has been called Skeptic. And so today, if you are skeptical of what's in the scriptures, that's okay. We are happy that you are here. We are happy that you have joined us. And this is a place where we don't seek to make fun of you or say, ha, we have all the answers. But we want to, in some ways, cause more questions for all of us. We want to think through this and maybe even believe our beliefs, but also doubt our doubts. And so that's what I hope that you can gain from this. In week 1, we looked at the resurrection, this crazy idea that Jesus actually rose from the dead. And we saw how there is good historical evidence that he did. And if we understand that Jesus rose from the dead, that means everything in life changes. Everything. The way we live, the way we think, all of it changes. So if you want to, you can go back and listen to that. But another one you can go listen to is last week. We talked about pain and suffering. All of us deal with pain and suffering. If we aren't currently dealing with it, we will deal with it one day again. It's something that we were all have happened to us, have happened to those around us, and we have to learn, how does a good God, an all-good God, and an all-powerful God allow pain and suffering in our lives? And last week we looked at a defense for that, and we talked about it. But this week we're going to be asking a question about what is good? What is good in general? And the question is, can you be good without God? So with that, let's read in Isaiah chapter 6, and we're going to be reading through verse 7. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord seated on a high and lofty throne, and the hem of his robe filled the temple. Seraphim were standing above him, and each had 6 wings, and with 2 they covered their faces, and with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they flew. And one called to another, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God of armies. His glory fills the whole earth." The foundation of the doorway shook, and the sound of their voices and the temple was filled with smoke. Then I said, "Woe is me, for I am ruined, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and because my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of armies." Then one of the seraphim flew to me, and in his hand was a glowing coal that he had taken from the altar with tongs, and he touched my mouth with it and said, "Now that this has touched your lips, your iniquity is removed, and your sin is atoned for." So, We'll get to this in just a moment, but I want to start here with this idea of a holy God, and then we'll unpack that as we kind of go along. Last week, I did a dog example. There's this funny thing when you're up here and you're speaking that throughout the service, people will drift off, and at certain moments, you'll see like most people are drifted off, and you just kind of feel like you're up here talking by yourself. And that's okay. It happens. I saw a meme this week that was, this isn't in my notes. I'm just making this up as I go along to keep you here longer. But anyway, meme this week, it was like, you can sit through Infinity War for 3 hours and not have to go to the bathroom, but you can't sit through a sermon for 45 minutes without having to go to the bathroom twice. So, anyway, I know that what I do is not Infinity War. That was a great movie. If you hadn't seen it, I won't spoil anything. But I think it is important. But anyway, all that to say, the second I mentioned a dog last week, everybody was like, back in. I was like, oh, I got to talk about dogs more often. People love dogs. So here goes the next dog example. When a dog, we wake up the earth yesterday and there was dogs everywhere, and it was, all these owners are talking about all their dogs, it's all kinds of different breeds and stuff. And when a dog comes running up to you, when the good boy or the good girl comes running up to you and is bouncing and it's happy and it walks up to you and it comes right up to like smile at you and stuff, and you come up and you bend down on one knee and you start to pet it, what do you say? You say, oh, who's a good boy? Or who's a good girl? Right? Okay, maybe just me. Anyway, you can't help it, and then you try to encourage them. Oh, you're the good boy, you're the good girl, whatever, And it's really great. Well, I saw this meme also. I'm really into memes today. I saw this meme on the internet recently. It said, I didn't want to just be a good boy. I wanted to be a great boy, the greatest boy that ever lived. It's pretty funny. I laughed at that because, don't really put great against good all of a sudden. That's not necessarily what you mean when you pet the dog. But at the same time, it brings up a question. What in the world is good? What does it mean to be good at anything? What does it mean to be a good employee? What does it mean to be a good father, a good sister or brother or a mother? What does it mean to be good, a good person, a good human? And that's what we want to look at today. The question is, can we be good without God? So maybe you're thinking, of course you can be good without God. For instance, there are billionaires in the world that give away all kinds of money. I was looking this up, and Warren Buffett and Bill Gates are non-religious, for sure. They are agnostic at best, and at times you can find certain things that say that even atheist. And while they are respectful, and they're not like vehement atheists where they're pushing what they think on other people, it tends to be their belief system. Well, in 2017, Warren Buffett and Bill Gates were the most charitable billionaires in the United States, which is pretty incredible that we have a list of billionaires that are the most charitable to think that there's that many billionaires, but they were the most charitable of all billionaires in the United States. Let me give you some statistics on Warren Buffett. As of 2017, so I'm sure it's more now, he gave $43 billion away. That's billion with a B. From year 2000 to 2017, gave $43 billion away. That is 71% of all of his wealth. Don't worry, he has 20 billion left. I think he can make it on 20 billion. I think we could probably make it on $1 billion, but he actually wants to give all of that away before he dies. I don't know how his kids think about it. I'm sure he's figured a way to take care of everybody and all that stuff, but he wants to give it all away before he dies because he sees this as all that there is. And it's super noble of him to do that, and he's done some really great things through the money that he has been given. Also, Bill and Melinda Gates founded this foundation in 1994 called the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and they give away not just their own money, which they give so much money through this program to help people all over the world, but in this foundation, other people give to it, and they just give billions and billions and billions of dollars away. This is their mission, to ensure more children and young people survive and thrive. It's awesome. Their motto is, all lives have equal value, and we are impatient optimists working to reduce inequality. That's awesome, right? That's beautiful. I think it's a beautiful thing that they're after. And all I can do is cheer when I hear the updates every year about how they're fighting malaria, the most deadly disease in the world, and how they're trying to cure HIV. They're using their immense wealth to do great good. And just these two men alone, not including all the other billionaires that are on the list, have given over $80 billion away. That's a number that I really can't even fathom. Most of us can't fathom how much money that is. Maybe in some way you've benefited from that as they have supported the sciences to help find cures for these things. And so, can we be good without God? Well, it seems like we figured it out. Of course, we can be good without God. These two men have done it. I'm sure other people that don't believe in God at all have done it. We can all go home. It's not really the question today. Because the question isn't, can you be good without believing in God? Because obviously you can. The question is, can you be good without God? There's a distinct difference that I want to make sure we pull out here. That it's not about if you can be a good person while not believing in Him, but that is there a concept of good at all? Is there a concept, as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation says, of equal value if there is no God at all? Duke philosophy professor Alex Rosenberg, he created this thing called, well, you guys know what a catechism is? Like you ask a question, and then people respond back with an answer, and usually it's used to catechize people before baptism. That was anciently what it was done. So as an atheist, he's come with his own catechism, and it's pretty interesting. I want to look at it here, and we don't have to say it back, because that would be weird, but we are going to look at it. And this is the catechism that he came up with in his book. He says, is there a God? No. What is the nature of reality? What physics says it is. He's making a claim about materialism, that there's only the material world there. What is the purpose of the universe? There is none. What is the meaning of life? Ditto. Why am I here? Just dumb luck. Does prayer work? Of course not. Next. Is there a soul? Is it immortal? Are you kidding? Is there free will? Not a chance. What happens when I die? Everything pretty much goes on as before, except us. What is the difference between right and wrong, good and bad? There is no moral difference between them. That should make you uncomfortable to hear that. Next slide. Why should I be moral? Because it makes you feel better than being immoral. Is abortion, euthanasia, suicide, paying taxes, foreign aid, or anything else you don't like forbidden, permissible, or sometimes obligatory? Anything goes. That's the atheist's guide to reality, enjoying life without illusions. That should kind of concern you as we think about what it means to have a world without God. Richard Dawkins, this is the quote we looked at last week, but I think it's important to pull out a couple of new parts in it. It says, the universe that we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is, at bottom, no design and no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but pitiless indifference. That you are just along the ride, and you and black holes and tapeworms, you're just a part of this whole thing that has happened by accident. And there is no good and no evil. But if you look at Richard Dawkins and you look at his life, you realize that he's actually done some really good things. He's given away money. He's done philanthropic works. He's volunteered, and he's done some really good things. And so the question is, why? Why would he go about doing these? And what it seems is that no matter how much we believe, and no matter how much our logical conclusions come to an end that says that there is no good, which is what honest atheists will come to, they can't stop trying to search for the good and be good. That they in themselves, in some way, reflect a creator that they don't believe in. So life without God has no basis for objective moral values. This is kind of what we're going to talk about, the objectivity of moral values. Are moral values real? Are they objective, or are they just subjective in life? See, because subjective kind of makes sense for us. Like if we're thinking to ourselves, we're like, yes, I kind of want morals to be subjective, because then I get to do whatever I want. I can live how I want, because my life is about me, and you really can't judge me, which is kind of our culture's motto these days. Don't judge me. I'm going to live my way. I'm going to be autonomous, and I'm going to do it my way. We can decide to live. It is the outflow of the phrase, you do you, right? So the difference between subjective and objective, we're going to talk just a minute, do a little philosophical stuff, and we'll get back into the scripture, I promise. But the difference between subjective and objective morals is this. If you ever go to J.P. Lick's, there is an objectively best ice cream, all right? It is cookies and cream ice cream. It is objectively better than all the rest, and Pastor Bill just rolled his eyes at me. Because you say, that's ridiculous. It's not objectively better, it's subjectively better. Because the truth of that statement is based in the subject, which is me, not the object, which is the ice cream. So my favorite can be different than your favorite, right? And that's how it works. And so when we look at morals that way, and we realize that morals are subjective, if we look at morals as subjective, it just becomes a little more, for lack of a better term, like going to the ice cream bar. Which moral do you like, and which would you like to have on a cone today? It's what's your favorite. But it can't be that way. I mean, think about this. If you were to have astronauts, you put them in space, and they have no way of knowing. They're far away from any planet. They're just in the void of space, and they're floating around in space. And you're to ask them, well, which way is up? And they go, oh, this way's up. Duh. And then you're sitting there, and you're like, well, and you're turned the other way. He's like, no, that way's not up. And then you're upside down compared to them. You're like, this way's up. That's ridiculous, because you have no objective point of a reference point to say which way is up or down. The only thing that each of you can say is, this is above my head. But you can't say which way is up or down. And that's what subjective morals are. It's good for me, or it's good for you. Now, I'll live my way, and I can justify how I live, and I can justify the things I do. Because that's the thing, we kind of all intuitively know what morals are. We have a set of morals, but when we do something that goes against those morals, we usually have a reason for it. We don't argue that our morals are different from someone else's. We usually just say, well, this is why this is right for me, but you need to act this way. As a kid on the playground, if you were punched by someone, you would say, he has done me a great injustice. Actually, you probably wouldn't say that as a kid, but that would be, kind of a way to say it. He's done me a great injustice. He has punched me in the face, right? And you'd go and you'd hope they would get in trouble, and you want justice to be served, them to be expelled from school or whatever, But if you were to punch somebody in the face, you probably would have a reason for it. Well, did you hear the name that he called me? I just don't like the way his face looks. He's a mean person. I saw him picking on this person. I punched him in the face. And him on the other side would say, I have had a great injustice done against me. And so we can usually see from the other side, from the other perspective, we can see what good is, even if for ourselves we can find justification in ourselves. But there are things that are clearly wrong, things that we would agree are clearly wrong. They're wrong in all places, at all times throughout history. This is objective morality. Things are wrong all the time, no matter what. Things like rape. Not that everyone has believed it, but that is wrong. But we would look and we'd say, no, that's definitely wrong. And we could give good reasons why it's wrong. Child abuse, racial discrimination, and terrorism. We can look at those things and we can say those are objectively wrong. But why? Why are they objectively wrong? See, if from an atheist perspective, we're all just accidents of nature. That we all just, as we read, randomly kind of happened. And we're highly evolved animals that have large brains and can think about life, but in the sense, if we're just highly evolved animals, we really have no obligations. This week I was on Twitter, just flipping through it, and I saw this crazy video. It was a guy in a circus. He's a snake handler in a circus. It's always fun to watch, so I just had to stop. Massive python, like as long as this row almost in the front. And he's doing all kinds of interesting things with the snake, and I'm just like enthralled by it. I was like, but when's it going to happen? The title is, just wait for it or whatever. And he gets the snake and he puts it around his neck. And you know what the first thing I think about when he puts this snake around his neck? Well, that's dumb. I'm not putting a snake around my neck, right? I don't know about you. Maybe you're like the snake handling type. I'm not. I'm not putting the snake around my neck. And so he gets his snake, though, as a trick, and he puts it around his neck. And he's doing fine. All of a sudden, the dude just falls out. Just like, boom, boom, hits the ground and bounces. He hits the ground so bad. Well, what had happened was this python was strangling him around his neck, which I guess had never happened before because he just assumed that he was going to live through this, And he hits the ground, and people run out to help him, and they get the snake, and they wrap the snake, unwrap the snake from around his neck so he can breathe again. I don't actually know if he ended up living. It was like one of those things you're like, oh man, what am I watching right here? But you know what I thought? I said, he is an idiot for doing that. Because do you know what constricting snakes do? They constrict around people's necks. But you know what I didn't think? What an evil snake. I hope he dies. Because the snake has no moral obligations. He's just being a snake. He's just being a python. See, if God doesn't exist, human actions are the same. The no action should be right or wrong. We're just being human. This is what maybe you've heard from the Bloodhound Gang. You and me, baby, we ain't nothing but mammals. So let's do it like they do on the Discovery Channel. And you think, oh, that's gross. There's some truth to it, though. It is the logical ends of a way of thinking. But when a white supremacist enters into a Jewish synagogue and begins to shoot everybody up, we don't think, he's just being himself, just being his truest self. No, we're appalled by that. We say, that is evil. When a suicide bomber enters into a marketplace and he explodes himself and kills women and children and men, and their body parts are mangled across the ground, we don't look at that and say, man, you just do you. We say, that is evil. Objectively evil. See, we intuitively know that there are objective morals in the world. We can point out an injustice or something that's unfair. Just recently, Stop and Shop, if you tried to go to Stop and Shop recently, they were outside picketing, wanting fair wages, fair compensation for their work. And the reason they can say, it is unfair what is happening to us, all the work we're doing and not getting compensated for it fairly, the reason they can say that, and every time they say that something is fair, they are pointing to an objective value outside of themselves to say there is an ultimate fairness, and we aren't being treated that way. William Lane Craig says this. He says, just as our sense of experience convinces us that the physical world is objectively real, that you can pinch yourself, you can knock on something, you can realize the physical world is objectively real, our moral experience convinces us that moral values are objectively real. When we feel that sense that that is wrong, it should tell us that moral values are objectively real. Atheists feel it too. Michael Ruse, atheist philosopher at Florida State University, said the man who says that it is morally acceptable to rape little children is just as mistaken as the man who says 2 + 2 = 5. In other words, he's saying an objective truth here. That to think that it is okay to rape little children is right along the lines of objectively thinking that 2 + 2 is 5. But they just can't give an answer for why. They know it. We know it, but they can't give an answer for why. But they have tried, and they will try. Like if you were to have a conversation with somebody who considers themselves to be an atheist, they're going to give you some answers, and they should. I think that we all need to give some answers. So I want to give you the best contenders for it, and I think the first one is the best contender for it, I think, and the other two really fall really short for me. But I want to give you these, and I want to kind of give an answer to them if you do encounter them. The first is evolutionary altruism. So we think of evolution in terms of survival of fittest, that it's all a competition, that I want to be better than you, that kind of thing. And I'm going to do my best to be better than you, and biologically, the best win out. And so humans are, though, in this idea of evolutionary altruism, humans are fitted by evolution not just to compete, but to cooperate even at times, to sacrifice their own interest for the good of others. In other words, because cooperation is good to me and beneficial for me and beneficial for my DNA, I'm going to treat others with respect, and I've been conditioned through millions of years of evolution, conditioned to think that these things are grounded in reality, that these things are objective, but they themselves are not. Even atheists, though, as they hear this, they actually say that this would only apply to my family, my tribe, and those close to me. We can look in our country right now. We have this idea of tribalism. Everybody has their tribe that they're a part of, and they point at all the other tribes and say, they're wrong, or and the other tribe points back and says, no, they're wrong, and all this stuff. Well, somebody's right, okay? Both aren't necessarily wrong, and this idea of evolutionary altruism comes down to the idea that whatever helps me in the long run is going to be what's best for me. One of the big problems is there's no thought of injustice. How would you think of injustice for somebody on the other side of the globe? How would you think, okay, this person has no connection to me. They will not influence my life at all in any way, shape, or form, but you can see something horrible go on the other side of the world, and you can say that is wrong and that is evil. This wouldn't account for that. Steven Pinker said this. He said, if virtue is equated with sacrifices that benefits one's own group in competition with other groups, then fascism would be the ultimate virtuous ideology. We should go, no. We hear that and say, no, I don't think so. In fact, a few months back, there was the thing going around the internet. It was talk, punch a Nazi, right? Because we hate fascism so much and would stand up against it. Morals, in this view, are not actually objective. They are illusions of objectivity, but they themselves are not objective. They're still subjective, because this is what Darwin brought up in The Descent of Man. He said, if, for instance, to take an extreme case, men were reared under precisely the same conditions as hive bees, there would hardly be a doubt that our unmarried females would, like the worker bees, think it a sacred duty to kill their brothers, and mothers would strive to kill their fertile daughters, and no one would think of interfering, because we would think, what is beneficial for the hive? What is beneficial for my tribe? And even if it, in our sense, looks evil then, if we were conditioned evolutionary to think it so, we would think it was right. So there's a big problem there. There's two more. Next is majority rule. I think this one's pretty quick. We can look pretty quick and see where this kind of falls short. It's a bad idea. We don't have to really look much farther crowdsourcing morality than slavery in the South. There was a time period in the South where slavery was thought to be, by the majority, thought to be moral. And they took their time to try to convince people that it was moral. And we can look now and say, no, that was absolutely immoral, objectively wrong to own a person. But the majority said it was. And in the view of majority rule, you have no right to say that slavery is wrong. But if morals are objective, you do. Next would be pain and suffering. It's the kind of third one, is that if my action causes pain or suffering on another person, then that action is immoral. The problem with this is that, one, it makes animals rapists and killers. It's kind of crazy to think, because they will inflict pain on each other, like we talked about, being animals. But if you have to think about the fact also that if you're unaware of a pain, is it still immoral? And one instance I was researching was the idea that if people were in a coma and were absolutely unaware of what was going on around them, and there was no way for them to know what was happening, and this happens, that they could be raped and not feel any pain or have any of the emotional pain that goes along with that, and wake up 3 years later and never know what happened to them. In this view, it wouldn't actually be immoral if it was just based on pain. But we would say, intuitively, that is objectively wrong, and even wrong on a whole new level. So pain cannot be the objective basis. The best that pain can do is pain can be based in objectivity. So, what does the Bible have to say about this? And this is where we're going to get back into the scripture here. This is what we believe, is that if God does not exist, objective moral values and duties do not exist. This is at least what I want to present today. If God does not exist, objective moral values and duties do not exist. As we've discovered, objective moral values and duties do exist. Therefore, God exists. The fact that you have a compass in your heart that points north as a north star to tell you what is right and wrong, and it is so natural to you that you don't even know it. You cannot believe in God, and you still have this north star that leads you, that you can say, this is wrong, this is right, this is wrong, this is right. So, in the book of Isaiah, chapter 6, Isaiah enters into the temple of God in this great vision. It's a vision so real that it's as if he is there with him. And he's before God's throne room, and God is there, and he is in his presence, and around him are these seraphim, which means burning ones. They are incredible creatures with wings over their eyes, and they're flying through the air. And unbelievable. And he's there, and he sees them, and they're singing a song, and this is the song that they're singing. They're singing, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of armies. His glory fills the whole earth. Holy, holy, holy. When we look at God and we look at the scriptures, holiness is his most prevalent defining feature. It is who God is. He is holy. And it is, when we think of holy, we think of things like holier than thou, and we think of it kind of in a bad way, and we think of it only as doing with moral goodness, and it does have to do with that, but it has to do with more. See, to be holy in the scriptures is to be separate, utterly unique, and God is separate and utterly unique from us. There is nothing greater, there is nothing better, there is nothing more complete in the universe. God is the uppermost of all beings. He is the greatest conceivable being. You cannot conceive of a being greater than God, because if you could, that being would be God. Whatever you can conceive as the greatest conceivable being is God himself. And this is the presence that Isaiah is in front of. And he hears these angels singing, and Isaiah is terrified because he is standing in the midst of this holy, holy, holy God, 3 times holy, which is to exponentially increase his holiness and his greatness. And he is standing in the midst, as he says, unclean, a man of unclean lips. And he's read the scriptures. He knows where this goes. He knows what that means. If he is a man of unclean lips, the next thing on the agenda is death in front of a holy God. And this is what he says, woe is me, for I am ruined, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and because my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of armies, the holy, holy, holy one. And you think, Isaiah is a prophet. If somebody should have it together, this dude should have it together. Prophets were agents of God that communicated God's words to the people. I think Isaiah should have it together, but in the midst of the presence of God, God's holy, holy, holiness, he says, I am unclean, and he compares himself to the evil people that are around him. I did a little bar graph. Here we go. A little bar graph to help us, if you're visual like me, might help you understand. All right, so here's God's goodness. Now, this actually is less than God's goodness, but it's just an example. So here's God's goodness. There's Isaiah's goodness. And see, he's better than Israel's goodness. You see those numbers there? All right. Now, I want to show you on a graph what this means. Okay. So when you look at this, and you look at God's goodness here, right? It is unbelievably greater than the goodnesses of Israel and Isaiah. Now, Isaiah is better than Israel. He is closer to the goodness, but his goodness and Israel's goodness are so far off of God that it is not even noticeable. In fact, I have to get in here. It's like a half of a pixel once I get close here. It's not even noticeable. And so what he says is, I am unclean like they are unclean in the midst of the absolute glory and goodness and absolute moral perfection of God. And what we see is that morality is rooted in the nature of God himself. That to know what is good, and when we point to what is good, and when we have that internal, written on your heart, North Star in your life, what you're saying is that this thing in life is moving closer to the ideal that is the Lord of glory. And holy goodness is expressed in God's attributes, is expressed in his love, in his truth, his mercy, his patience, his grace, his peace, and his justice. And all the opposites of those would be the things that we know are wrong: hate, falsehood, and so on. And those things, through God, become the objective reference points for our life. If we take love, for instance, 1 John 4:8 says this. It's a beautiful verse. You should memorize it. It says, the one who does not know love does not know God, because God is love. Not God is loving, which it says also in scriptures. God is compassionate, which it says, but it says that he is himself love, a being of love. So you want to know love? You know God. You want to know truth? You know God. You want to know justice? You know God. And the greater we move toward that ideal, the more we line up with what's in our hearts that we know is true. If you think about recordings are best when they reflect the live performance, right? They are closer to, when they're actually closer to the live performance, what it would be to be in the presence of that performance. A recording is better once it moves closer to that. And you're going to compare the quality of the recording to the original live performance. See, God's holy goodness is kind of like the live performance that we compare all the recordings of goodness to. We say, that is the standard. He is the standard. Tim Keller says it this way. He says, there is no basis for moral obligation unless we argue that nature is in some part unnatural. We can't know that nature is broken in some way unless there is some supernatural standard of normalcy apart from nature by which we can judge right and wrong. And this is what we base all of our morality and what is right and wrong in, and how we know when we see something objectively wrong, it is objectively going against the character of God. God does not will something to be good, or God does not will something because it is good, but God himself in his nature is good. God's holy goodness is so overwhelming in this passage in Isaiah that Isaiah knows that he will be overcome by it and destroyed by it, not because it is bad, but because it is so good. Just outside my house, they're building some solar panels, not outside my house, down the road a little bit. They're building some solar panels and to absorb the sun and create good electricity for all the people around, you know. It's really a great thing. And the sun is a great power source. It's a beautiful thing. But if you get too close to the power of the sun, then that good thing destroys you. Not because it's bad, but because it is so good. And that's what getting into God's presence is like. And as Isaiah is in his presence, he feels that power and he knows, woe is me. Verses 6 and 7, this really strange thing happens. Then one of the seraphim flew to me, and in his hand was a glowing coal that he had taken from the altar with tongs. He touched my mouth with it and said, now this has touched your lips. Your iniquity is removed, and your sin is atoned for. In the Old Testament, if you were unclean, it meant that whatever you touched became unclean. So if you were to go into a room and start touching things, people would say, you're unclean, and I'm not going to touch the things you touch, because if I touch those things, I too will become unclean, and I want to be able to go worship at the temple. And if I'm unclean, I can't worship at the temple. And so they would stay away from it. And in this instance, Isaiah says, I am unclean, and yet this coal comes up and touches his lips, and the coal itself does not become unclean. But it transfers its goodness on to Isaiah. And Isaiah becomes clean and actually sits there and has a conversation with God about who's going to go to God's people and is able to stand in his presence. There's this interesting passage in Mark chapter 5. We're going to go back into the book of Mark in a few months, but so I won't spoil the whole thing, but I think it's really great. There's a woman, and she's been bleeding and unable to stop. In that culture, when a woman bled, it meant that she was unclean for that time period. Anyone that touched her would become unclean, and so she would become a social outcast, and there was something medically wrong with her. She gets wind that Jesus is coming into town, and so she goes out to find him, and she thinks this to herself. This is her idea. She says, if I just touch his clothes, I'll be made well. And so she finds him, and she comes up to him, and she just grabs the hem of his coat, and when she touches Jesus, not even his skin, but she touches that which is around him, that which radiates his goodness, she becomes clean. Jesus' holy goodness is put onto her, and her uncleanliness is cleaned away. And she becomes clean and is healed. See, normally Jesus would become unclean, but he is so clean that his goodness moves on to her. And this is what Jesus says to her in verse 34. He says, "Daughter," he said to her, "your faith has saved you. Go in peace and be healed from your affliction." See, you and me, we're like Isaiah. We're like this woman. One day we will stand before a holy, holy, holy God. The objective truth of all that is good. The greatest conceivable being the uppermost God. And we have no ability on our own to withstand the power of his goodness and holiness. We have no hope to survive. This week, a couple of students that I had in my student ministry, their father passed away. And it was shocking because he wasn't that old. Really tragic situation where their mother had passed away a few years earlier from cancer. And I think the father just never got over it. He never fully recovered from her passing. And he was a jolly guy as you met him in person. Really, every conversation I ever had with him was just really, really good. But at home, it was really tragic. We knew some of the things that were going on and some of the things that were happening. And so he just wasn't really a father like he should have been a father. And at times we would take his kids, and Allie and I would take care of them. We just want to be a safe harbor for them. We weren't doing anything crazy, just saying, like, stay over at our house tonight while mom and dad figure this out, that kind of thing. And so he passed away. I'm not sure why, but how it happened. But in my searching through, just trying to figure out what was going on with that, I found an old message that me and him had gone back and forth with on Facebook. It's weird, Facebook keeps all this stuff, and you go into the search bar, and then this message pops up, and it's this crazy conversation that we had about him and his kids and our family. And what he said to me was, he said, "I wish that my daughters loved me the way that they love you. I wish that I could be as good a dad to my kids as you've been to my kids." And when I read that, I was gut punched. Because this man who desired to be good, he wanted to be good. He was not ignorant of what was good, never was able to attain it. And I read this and just thought how terrible it is. And then I thought about myself, and I thought about Allie and the work that she did with these girls, and the work that I was able to do with them, and just love them and care for them, and just thinking, compared to the goodness of God, my tick up of goodness from her father was nothing. Maybe I was a little bit on my best days, a little bit closer to God than he was. But there's a good that I was never able to obtain, just like there was a good he's never able to obtain. that all of us are tragic failures. But Christ, through his death on the cross, becomes that purifying coal that when we are the ones that are impure and should make that which is pure unpure, Christ comes to us like that coal and he makes us pure. By placing our trust in the work that he's done, it's like letting that coal touch our lips and make that which is unclean clean. His holy goodness is transferred to you and makes you pure. All of us one day will face the white, hot, powerful presence of a holy, holy, holy God. Are you ready for that moment? Have you trusted in Christ as your Savior and as the one who makes you pure and clean? Let's pray. God, we contemplate your goodness, and it is so deep, so wide, and so big. It is almost incomprehensible. But God, we know that that is what we are to reflect, what we are to be. We're not ignorant of this. So today I pray, God, that you would help us as we seek to be holy as you are holy, be perfect as you are perfect. But God, there's one thing I know. We can't do it on our own. We need your cross, and we need your blood. Jesus. Today, for those in this room that haven't trusted in you, that are trying to do it on their own, may they realize that their goodness will never be enough, that they will be blown away by your glory one day. But God, I pray that in your goodness, they will also see how you have made a way for them. The good Father that gave his Son to us, that we could have life and life abundantly. Not just for now, but for all eternity. And stand in your presence and bask in all that is good. Pray all this in Jesus' name.